Friends, welcome back. Another episode of RX Radio. Special one coming live from Columbus, Ohio. Very rarely do you hear the words special and Columbus, Ohio in the same sentence, but here we are nonetheless. Got the chance to sit down with the overseer of the prescript nutrition arm of our education offerings, Dr. Dwayne Jackson, former professor at Western University, former student PhD postdoc at Yale University. Dwayne is by far, from an academic perspective, from an application perspective, untouchable. Great to be in Dwayne's company. As smart as he is, as good a coach as he is, as good a scientist as he is, better human there is not. Dwayne has quickly become a mainstay in the prescript education. Those of you who have gone through our anatomy and biomechanics, who have transferred over in taking some of our nutrition courses, can attest. So really great to catch up just in general, just being in the same room, but getting to capture some of it for you guys. Conversation we had about gut health, which was his presentation du jour at the Swiss Symposium in Columbus, Ohio. He goes through personalized approaches to gut health, how to assess 6 major signs and symptoms of poor gut health, the effect of the gut muscle axis, gut brain axis. I mean, this episode's super valuable if you're a coach, client, if you're giving nutritional advice or consultation. Taking a look at this is one of the biggest rocks, and I can say that from my own personal experience, both manipulating my own nutrition over the years as well as working with athletes and their nutrition. But I don't have to do that anymore because I got Dwayne's cell phone number, and I can just link Dwayne and he can do Dwayne things. But if you guys want to learn how to do Dwayne things when it comes to nutrition, especially as it pertains to gut health, Dwayne's put together an 8-week gut health specific nutrition course. Thought it was something that was worthy of its own topic, just given the impact that this has. I mean, looking at nutrition from a gut health perspective is such a big rock. Small hinges open big doors. And when it comes to inflammation, when it comes to muscle building, when it comes to stress and disease, you're really getting down to the nuts and bolts of gut health. Such a huge weapon to add to your arsenal of coaching services, being able to help people out. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal is a quote that gets tossed around a lot in this episode and helps us really understand the importance of gut health and the sophistication and simplicity of some of our interventions. Dwayne, in pure Dwayne fashion, takes very complex biochemistry, physiology, and makes it such a pun intended digestible way to learn. I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Like I said, prescript gut health course, an absolute must as far as I'm concerned. Listening to Dwayne deliver material is such a pleasure, and especially when the material is so infinitely valuable. So that's up for sale now. It will be kicking off at the end of the month. So head over now, www.pre-script.com, reserve your seat. Very excited for this. It is the first run of this course. It will be one of many. It will be a mainstay in our curriculum. Dwayne is, like I said, second to none when it comes to the delivering high value, digestible, actionable content. So without further ado, Dr. Jordan Junta, myself, and Dr. Dwayne Jackson. Lundy, hit it.
You're tuned in to RX Radio.
Dr. Jackson, back in the house. Not a house, hotel. We've surmised that this is the hotels that hookers get killed in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Ohio.
And it looks fancy on the outside, but...
Right. It's still Ohio on the inside.
It's Ohio
it's
on the inside.
It's no Yuki, British Columbia.
It's not Yuki, British Columbia.
That's home sweet home. Since last you've been on the podcast, you made some moves.
I've made some moves. Yeah, I moved to the West Coast. Our house is the last one in Canada.
No way.
Wow. Yeah.
So furthest western point.
It's as far as you can go. Like if you go on Google Maps and look at it, you'll fucking laugh. Like you drive, you take a ferry to Vancouver Island, and then you get on this highway called Highway 4 eventually, and it's one road in. And when you get to the end of that road, the Pacific's straight in front of you, the big Pacific, and then you hang a left on this one road. There's no other way in or out. You hang a left, you go to the end of that road, hang a right, go to the end of that road, and my house is right on the beach of the Pacific. You see Mount Rainier from the beach.
That's way too specific. People are showing up at his house. That was way too
Someone's on Google Maps right now.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Well, the best part about it is though, you have to be fucking committed to come. Like you have to be really creepy. And in fact, hilarious enough. So I had to. I won't say anything about my address, but anyway, we're on the beach in the wintertime. and there's no one there in the winter, right? It's a big travel area. There's like 1 million people that come in the summertime, like over the course of the summer. And we're just having a fire, me and my family. And there's no one on the beach. And these group of people just park right beside us, like when we're pulling up. And then they park it on the beach. And these beaches are fucking huge, right? And they're sitting on this log straight in front of us. And they fucking start pulling out all these prescript. I swear to God.
Your mouth.
And my wife goes, do you think that's a coincidence that they're sitting there?
No.
And I'm like, seems pretty odd, doesn't it? And she goes, that's why we don't put our address online.
Did they say anything?
So they ended up walking up to me after saying, Dr. Jackson, we saw you guys in the park a lot, and I'm thinking, we're in the middle of fucking nowhere. Like, so it is kind of a funny place because, I mean, you got to really be crazy to want to go there to try and find my house.
Now, you found your house.
I found my
Right, so clearly. The move to Solidarity, deliberate, I'm assuming?
Yeah, it's funny. My wife and I started working with this performance psychologist to kind of elevate our lives. Like we figured, we'd gone, both of us collectively have 30 some odd years of university. She's a professor, she still is. And we got to a point where we felt like we kind of, when I was on dialysis, I thought it was just a big fucking challenge, being on dialysis. That was really cool, kind of cool. But apparently during these sessions, she was like, it really affected me. I hope she won't listen to this. She was like, I bawled my eyes out after every session because there's the alarms going off, and my hemoglobin was so low they were worried about getting a transfusion. If I got a transfusion, then I'd have to blah blah blah. So all that goes through, and so the minute I get my transplant, she's like, as soon as you can lift 20 pounds, we're renovating this fucking house and we're moving. And I'm like, where are we going? She's like, we're going to Yuki, where your buddy is. And she'd already been there for a visit. And I said, make it happen. And I totally was bluffing. I'm like, I'm not doing any of this stuff. And within all of a sudden we're making offers on houses we haven't even seen. So we ended up buying it online.
This sight unseen.
Yeah, and then I'd never been there. And the first time I go there, my buddy picks me up at the Nanaimo airport, and friggin' 3 hours later, 4 hours later, we're pulling up into this little rinky-dink surf town with all these dirty hippies and stuff, and he's like, I'll take you to your house, and I had to sign. That was the day I was signing off on the deal, and I was like, I called my wife and I said, this place is pretty rugged, eh? It's big boy pants here. I said, our house is right on the Pacific, and there's 30-foot waves crashing off the rocks in front of our house. Wow. And we're sea level. We have our own beach, right?
For now.
Exactly, right? So anyway, she's like, yeah, and I go, you have to wear a wetsuit in the ocean, eh? It's the Northwest Pacific. It's pretty freaking cold. And she's like, yep, no problem. And so that's how it started. And the next thing you know, we were freaking packing up. We bought the house, and then we had it for a year. We didn't stay there. We had to figure out a way to get the hell out of Ontario, and then packed up and left. And it was pretty good move. It was bold.
What changes have you noticed since because you're living out something that probably because your father lives on 60 acres?
Yeah,
60 acres, and no one around. The more I'm around, the more I'm like, I can't be around. Around is not where I need to be.
You need to not be around.
And because you were the center of your disciplinary universe, 25, 30 years. You go from academia, in the school, in the lab, in the gym, in the conference rooms and supplementations and all that, to, hey, look, it's novel that there's another human being within sight. What is can you pinpoint any changes to just you personally of now that I've moved here, the Solidarity has offered me X, Y, or Z?
Yeah, it was the first year was difficult. I fucking had to create a studio, a gym, and put a shed in because we moved out of 9,000 square feet into 3,000 square feet or 4,000 square feet. And my garage went from 900 and some odd square feet to 300, and that's where I had to put the studio and all this friggin' commercial equipment that I'd bought without seeing the house. And so The first little bit was tough because I felt like I equated it to kind of like digging your own grave. Like it was kind of like I'm fucking like I fell over the rafters, broke both my wrists, like fucking putting the soundproofing in. Then I'm working with broken wrists because now I can't move my thumb. I got like a half fucking thumbs up, and then I had to put this shed in because we couldn't fit all of our stuff, and like everything rusts there if you don't like because we're right on the water, right? So we had to get our bikes and stuff in somewhere. So I had to get the shed built before winter because these are gnarly winds that come off the ocean. And so I built this shed with my wrists all taped up. So that part was tough. But now that I've settled in, like we've been there like a year and a half, the last 6 months were really neat because the thing I noticed was the signal to noise ratio.
Oh,
changed,
interesting.
Right?
Like in your thoughts.
No, the actual pure like signal to noise. So in other words, like the good shit, the signal, and all like the noise, which could be anything from stress and stuff like that, right through to like light pollution, food, asshole people, like all that stuff went away. And all of a sudden it was neat because like no train noise, no car noise, like zero shitty noise. So it's neat because you have a lot of signal and very little noise. And what is noise is like the foghorn off the lighthouse, the fucking bell on one of the buoys that sits out front of our house that tells you where the tides are, and the waves hitting the rocks.
I'll deal with that rather than like coked up hookers like yelling on the sidewalk.
Right. And that it was so weird because as soon as I realized this kind of signal to noise ratio change, you know, coming from academia, where it's just like, you know, assholes with big egos, and coming from medical biophysics, which is another whole world of autism. It was really neat to kind of like, it took me like a year to decompress.
Yeah.
And then once I let the noise settle and realized that this is all good, man, it's been like golden.
Have you ever read the book Walden?
No.
By George Henry Thoreau?
No.
We go lived on Walden. It's interesting. I'll get it for you because it's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite books, and it talks about the author, the 2 years he spent on Walden Lake, and just like what the seclusion offered him.
Yeah, and it's really neat because like just as much as like, you know, going in the backyard and just grabbing your blackberries for like right away for the bowl you're having, it takes you like 3 minutes, right? And
is it bad that my default was like, oh, he's going to grab cell phones. He's going to grab old drug dealer cell phones. Like when I hear blackberries, like I'm still so plugged into the machine that I was like, it's like Jim Balsillia's neighbor. Where is he getting blackberries plural? That's insane.
That's the noise that he doesn't hear.
That's the noise I don't hear.
How do you deal with like, you know, because you've been in and out, like you travel a lot. Do you have a different level of sensitivity maybe to like going back? Like if you were to go Eaton Center, Toronto, or if you were to go Times Square, New York, you spend enough time around places like that, you know, 2 years kind of away in solitude, it isn't enough to counteract your familiarity with situations like that? Or is that kind of like, yo, get me back to the coast?
No, it's really cool actually. I've been really, it's been really neat because I've been going to Don Saladino's like every month, right, for like a week kind of thing, and going down. Thanks for the introduction to him. He's one of my best friends, man. He's an awesome guy. And, you know, you fly into LaGuardia and everything else. And it was really, really neat because I actually missed the energy of the cities. But it's really nice when you're finished and you know you're heading back to the island. Yeah. Like when you're leaving the island, it feels weird because I take these little puddle jumper planes just down. There's a little airport down the street from our place, and you're flying out in this little plane, and you can see like all like the spiritual beauty of where you live, like the nothingness, you know, and then you kind of land in Vancouver, and then it starts.
Yeah.
Right.
Wah, wah, wah.
And then, but it's neat because then when you get to New York, you've kind of, you know, you're excited to feel some of this energy, and you feel it for a while, and then when you go home, you're like, yeah, it was, you know, that felt good. It kind of energized me. Now I can go back and, you know, think.
Have you noticed any changes like physically, like the stress? I mean, obviously, like, don't need to explain this to you, but psychological, physiological stress a lot of times can act same. Would you say that you're generally less stressed out there, and what effects, if any, have you noticed from that lack of stress?
Yeah, you can't really be stressed out there. You'll be run out of town. It's actually it's hilarious. Like it actually the sign going into Yuki says stress-free zone.
Okay, so we get off the plane, we take a right, we go left, and then it's at the end of the street, we take a right and then another left. Got it.
Yeah, it's
Got it.
pretty neat because what I noticed was that I instead of filling my space with thinking, like so in between work activities or whatever else, instead of just sitting and thinking or randomly just surfing the net or what should I do for a post, we usually just head down to the beach, have a fire. I'll go in for a cold dip. My daughter will play around, my wife might go surfing. And it's really cool because you can do that at like 2 p.m, come home at 4 and still pick up work again. And so it's a real dichotomy between the what we consider stress and what we consider play. And you get to live that like every day as much as you want to. We have e-bikes and stuff, so you can rip around everywhere. It's pretty neat. It's like living in the 70s, really. I mean, you guys wouldn't be able to relate to that, but it's small town, like 1,900 people. Most people leave in the winter because there's no work for them, and so only people that stay are people that can afford a house to stay there, or are crazy enough to stay there in the winter. But I friggin' love the winters there because it's just we don't get any sort of real cold weather or anything. We have palm trees and stuff there, but it never gets hot, right? So it's it's just a really it's stable.
Has it changed?
Everything's stable.
Has it changed the way like
nice.
you? I mean, you obviously manage like clients and athletes, like high-profile A-list celebrities to pro bodybuilders, and I'm sure like just looking in the living in the academia world, understanding the manifestation of stress and how it can manifest and negatively impact whether it's a physique, whether it's performance, whether it's health. Do you have a newfound respect for the impact now? Because I mean, I'm sure plugged into the academic system. If you guys aren't familiar with Dwayne's back, go listen to the previous episode. Plugged into the academic machine from the inception of your career, right? Like a high stress. I would imagine when going to Yale, getting your PhD and postdoc, high stress into the university system, into academia.
Yeah, never left. Yeah,
They never left, and then you go from that to hey, let's go start a fire at 2 p.m. and then like saunter back to work.
Kind of weird. It's surreal some days. Some days I actually get stressed out because I don't know who I am. Like it's wild because I always said that academia didn't never ever define me. I always would say that. It was obviously a cover up for the fact that I had fucking tattoos on me that were all about my research and science across my
the
chest.
science tattoo one. That's a good one.
It was, I said it to my wife. I said, I never realized how much academia defined me. She's like, that's all you fucking talked about is where you came from and what you did. People would say like, hey, Dwayne, nice to meet you. Who are you, basically? And I'd be like, oh, I'm Dwayne from fucking blah, blah, blah. And so it's been a really neat transition. It caused stress at first because I was like, how do I define myself? Like people would ask me like what do you like? Because they'd ask you, they'd be like, what do you do? Because we bought this house there, right? And the big rumor was we bought it without seeing it. We bought it online, and so all the locals are kind of like, who are these people coming in?
Yeah.
And they say, what do you do? And I'd be like, I don't really know what I fucking do, to be honest. I used to be a professor, and I retired like last year, and that's so. But now I've kind of got my groove. Definitely can feel a difference. I'm back to like snowboarding. We just bought seasons passes at big mountain out there, Mount Washington, 2 hours away from our place on the island. I mountain bike now again. All the things that I loved to do, things I loved that I actually forgot about when I was so embedded in writing grants and being in the lab and doing frickin' surgeries on small things under microscopes and being focused for 7 hours. It's really neat, and it's and I've also realized that I actually I don't have to use half my brain to do what I do now. Like I have to throttle it back a notch now, which is really, really nice. And probably if they watch like the other podcasts and stuff I've done, you'll notice a kind of a different energy in me, and that's really nice to know that you're not always like the throttle's always all the way forward, and you don't have any juice left in the engine if there's if you need any more. And now it's like pull the throttle back a bit, more relaxed in kind of my approach to life. And physiologically, I've noticed it in my blood pressure. I've noticed it in my physique. By the time I left academia, I was overweight and feeling like a professor, to be honest. And so, yeah, no, it's really changed a lot of that stuff. Sleeping's a lot better now. I don't know whether that's just because, we've got like the moon shining through our window with the wind and you can hear the ocean through it and that kind of stuff, or whether it's, just that signal to noise ratio. But overall, it's been a really enlightening experience, and kind of proves that you can pick up and do anything anywhere if you want to, if you just kind of use your brain a little and be innovative.
Like when you look at blood labs and you're inundated with data and you're working with a client, does the change in your own physiology as a manifestation of the change of environment psychology that comes with that, do you lean more into like, hey, like what's going on? Well, I'm 10 weeks out to a shot. No. What's going on? Like, has it affected the way you add weight to the variables in assessing like client health?
Yes. Kind of insightful question.
I save it for you, man. I know you're a deep thinker. So
Wow. Yeah, you want to know what? Like, okay, so, the blood work, everything else, we can unfuck that pretty easy. I'm pretty good at that.
You can.
But what's really, really interesting is, like, I've become more of, like, a psychological counselor because I've realized that, like, people who come to see me, like, so I deal with the people that no one else can handle. So, I mean...
No pressure.
Like, so when like, Coach A has worked with someone for 6 years and now all of a sudden they can't, perform or can't lose weight, like, or they're gaining weight or something's changed in their life, they just toss them my way. And so I get this kind of problem solving stuff, which I really love to problem solve. But every time I start problem solving, it generally comes down to figuring out what the psychological aspects of whatever they're dealing with are, and being just a human being to them as opposed to being this big, like, using big words and, throwing around a bunch of biochemicals and this kind of stuff, but rather just having a heart-to-heart talk with them. And it's really cool because with my, I've got a huge academic background, but I've got a massive sports background that I usually define myself with a lot more. And I've also fucked up a lot. Right. I mean, I've fucked up my health with bodybuilding. I've fucked up my musculoskeletal system with pro motocross racing. And so I can relate to anybody. And I'm old now. That's the best part. Like, I'm old. So I fucking got mileage behind me. Right. And so it's been a really cool journey working with, these folks, because generally people like when you can relate or like when you can disclose. So a lot of my clients, it's kind of a full disclosure, confidential conversation, and we always make strides to move ahead, and I haven't failed yet.
At the level of intervention, when it comes to like managing stress as it pertains to people coming to you, like end of the rope, I've seen everyone. How many times do you hear that? Yeah. Right? Like he's tucked away in a clinic in a gym that no one's ever heard of, but like he's the guy and he unfucks people. How many, or what are the things that when you get to these people who are, out of options, they think they're out of luck, what are the things that you find yourself saying the most often when you're like, okay, is it just the conversation itself, like just having a soundboard, unbiased, don't really care, not that you don't care, but like I'm not going to, and I can't really tell anyone what you tell me? Or are there like simple interventions that you find like, hey, most people that come to me and that are fucked up for X, Y, and Z reason, we start to see phenomenal improvements in, mood, stress, sleep, anxiety, depression, digestion, lipids, whatever, however, general to specific you want to get with these things that are big rocks.
Yeah, so it really depends on the person, how I approach that. So I always start with kind of a stress analysis. And I look at their blood work. So I'll get them to email me any of the vitals they have, or any imaging or path reports or labs. If they don't have labs that are recent, I'll make them get labs before we even start talking. And then I let the data drive kind of the conversation. And there's all kinds of conversations that come out of that. But the one thing that I see in every single client that comes to me is complaints about sleep, complaints about digestion, complaints about, they may not directly say digestion, but they'll say, I feel bloated, I gain weight, miraculously over the course of an evening. these kind of things. And then when I start looking at their blood work, it shows that, most people, that come to me are under a lot of inflammatory stress. And that can be driven by, a number of different things, anything from, poor gut health right through to, extreme stress at work. And like you said, I work with pretty high-end clients. So a lot of them have really, really stressful lives, trying to lead what they do. But generally speaking, it literally comes down to digestive problems that manifest as a result of all their stress. And so the probably biggest underlying thing I deal with all my clients is to explain to them that, we have a certain allostatic load that we can handle. And stress comes in all kinds of flavors. So if we're getting poor sleep and we're out doing blow at event A, right? And we're trying to train at 7 a.m. because we got to stay in shape, and we're missing meals throughout the day, there's a few variables in there that we can actually control to get those stress levels under control. And the first one is, okay, well, we gotta start sleeping. And one of the ways to do that is to quit doing blow.
Unfortunately, I've dealt with athletes where the blow is that's not going anywhere.
That's a hard one.
You can't take the blow from us.
It's like, try and sleep another hour. Though.
All right.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny because once you start kind of honing in, it's really obvious how the stress, gut health, sleep cycle, inflammation, all the dots start connecting. And then you start working with them, kind of secretly, because a lot of people don't want to address gut health issues, especially if they're not out of shape, so to speak. So physically or aesthetically out of shape. And so, you start applying diets and applying strategies like breathing and these kind of things throughout the day. And once they start seeing the results, it's pretty good. Now, I usually start with, some people like to just feel the results. Some people are pretty intuitive, so they can feel it. And others, I get them to wear like an Apple Watch or some sort of, wearable that gives me some sort of heart rate variability measure. And then I can show them over time that their relative heart rate variability has changed for the better over time. And then it becomes really easy to start putting all the puzzle pieces together, because like I said about allostatic load, is that, exercise, is a eustress. It's not a distress. It's a very good thing. However, if you're operating, with the water level up to your eyebrows, anything above that's going to drown you. It doesn't matter whether it's, eustress, it's still going to be distress. So what I try to do with everybody is kind of at least bring the water level down, to the lip level, so that we have some room to wiggle when life does some of these things, because it's always going to do that, right? And eventually, within usually 3 months, I'll get, for an analogy, I'll get them, their water level down to their nipples. And then they've got lots of room to move. And that's when we start getting the magic. And that usually happens around the 16-week to, 20-week point. And, it's diet, it's training, it's lifestyle, which includes sleep, some supplementation if we need it. And then that's when the kind of the puzzle pieces work. And then we get convergence of all those. And that's when the synergy starts to kind of show them that, this is a loop. It's not like digestion, sleep, stress, all these things are all connected. And once you can kind of start taking some of the variables that are highly stressful to the body out, people can feel really quickly how well that works. And usually that's with digestion, because it's a chronic condition, right? When we're eating, it's chronic. We're eating throughout the day. And so when they start noticing they're not bloated or they don't feel like shit, in the morning, so they can actually have a nice big breakfast, take a big shit. All this stuff actually starts to give biofeedback to them. No different than when, you feel your hands sweating. That's that biofeedback tells you you're stressed, and it starts like a loop in your head. When you can pull something from that loop and make it so that they feel more healthy, then the magic happens, and it's literally like magic.
It's funny that you worded it that way. Feel more healthy, right? Like people's like the idea that there's no healthy food and there's there's just sort of these macronutrients, but people demonize foods and behaviors as healthy and unhealthy, and I'm sure it all exists on a gradient. But it's interesting to me that you chose those words specifically, that they feel more healthy. Like how important is belief in the process.
It's very important. I think, to be honest, like a lot of the stuff I do isn't magic. I think I'm really good at connecting dots. Yeah, I did this really cool test, like a psychological test called the Gallup test. It was like the grandfather of psychology created this crazy psychological tool, and you can find out like what kind of what are your core strengths.
Okay.
And it goes through that, and mine are all about problem solving, competition, like application, this kind of stuff. And one of the big things that came out from this freaking 5 or 6 hour test I did was that I'm really able to connect dots really easily. And they say so fast that some people think that you're fucking winging it. And so you have to kind of reverse back and go backward and say, how did you get to that like thing, right? And that's, I think, where my strength is. But what I do isn't magic. Like anybody could apply what I do. It's just you have to be able to see the connections. And so when people start to work with me, I think first off, right, I've got a relatively high education. I've been working in the in the industry for a long time. So there's a lot of trust. And trust obviously is a really important thing for people to feel better about a decision they made. Especially if they're paying quite a bit of money for it. But beyond that, I really think that when people feel healthy, it's not just a shift in it's not a placebo. It's actually like I woke up this morning and I took a solid shit instead of one that was soft serve, right? Or when I eat broccoli, I don't get gas. I've worked with some pretty high level people in the entertainment industry, called that had really bad gut health problems. And you can imagine, like, if you had like a lot of gas and you had to be on set all the time, how embarrassing that would be. So when you can make someone who said, I've always had this problem, make it go from that to like, oh, now 30% of the time I have this problem, and now it's like, oh my God, this problem's totally gone. They're hooked. Right?
So is there a way that you can define gut health? Or is that something that, like you said, you just kind of have to feel?
No, there's a bunch of ways we can, so from if someone comes to you completely screwed, there's a bunch of blood markers that we can look at. Generally, if people are complaining about bloating and these kind of things intensely, you will see a change in HSCRP. So it's a high sensitivity marker of, underlying inflammation or low level inflammation. And that really drives inflammatory effects throughout the body. So that's why they say, your guts are connected to your joint health and all these kind of things. So they'll start to notice that they can move better, right? They're not waking up in the morning stiff. So there's actual tangible assets that they can gain from good gut health. But digestive health is the center of, everything that goes on in the body. And we have the gut-brain axis, the gut-liver axis, the gut-muscle axis, which I'm going to speak about today in my talk. Gut-pancreas axis, and all these scientists are jumping on these axes, but fucking, it's systemic inflammation. Of course, if it's coming from lipopolysaccharides that are being leaked from your gut into your bloodstream, and causing inflammation around the body, then yeah, your guts are linked to everything. And because blood flows through that whole central, organ chamber that we have in our body, then everything that we eat and digest, if we're releasing, cytokines that are inflammatory and not balancing them with anti-inflammatory cytokines, which you see in poor gut health, then you are going to feel it. You're going to feel it in your joints. You're going to feel it in your brain. You're going to feel brain fog. Sometimes it manifests as, bad sleep. Sometimes it manifests as when I wake up in the morning, I can't think properly like I used to be able to. Sometimes it manifests as, man, oh man, ever since I had this bacterial infection and they gave me antibiotics, I've just had real trouble with my joints. And so there are real tangible assets that you can really take a look at and figure out if you're making a difference. And these aren't like just, in your head, so to speak. How
much variability do you see? Because I think it's the big rocks are the big rocks, right? And I think in cases where people are not paying attention to sleep or to stress or to resistance training or calorie intake, I would assume you could get pretty far with a general intervention, but it's the last 10% or the last 15%. How much variability do you see in the forks in the road that like kind of bifurcate as you go, okay, now personalized genetic individualization is going to say, because one thing that always comes to mind, there a couple of years ago, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth was like all the rave, but there's common interventions for people who have it or people who don't have it that are like seen like, oh, like gut healthy, like, oh, this has lactobacillus acidophilus, it's 10,000 what billion trillion whatever the fuck, so like, that's a lot of lactobacillus acidophilus or whatever the fuck. How binary and specific, what data points start to drive the variability intervention? Because I think all of us in the room, excluding you, the three people in the room, excluding Jay Marsh, apparently, fuck you, leave me out of this. I think all of us, like, if someone came to us in dire straits and they were overweight and we looked at a diet ripe with like processed foods and the high amounts of calories and hey, dude, let's go for a walk. We might be able to improve it based off of improving how much those symptoms are just byproducts of poor general health habits that two health generalists know a little bit about. How much variability do you see as you start to peel back layers of the onion of like, oh man, a nightshade for this person, look out, but a cruciferous for this person, look out? Because I feel like gut health is very generalized as far as its marketability. It's like, oh, we're going to take these pills, you're going to eat your yogurt and kimchi and you'll be fucking shitting diamonds forever. Like it has to be more complicated than that.
Yeah. So you can improve gut health with some pretty like generic, interventions, probiotics, these kind of things. It's the actual real magic starts to happen once we've got the guts reset a little bit. So, for example, if you put anybody who eats a mixed diet, even if a shitty mixed diet, they come to you, I'm not digesting food properly. When I shit, I see green peppers solid in it, and my blueberries are in the toilet bowl. It's easy to kind of unfuck a situation that's so fucked. Right, and so you can fix that. You can fix that stuff pretty easy with some interventions of just using a low FODMAP diet or a carnivore diet, for crying out loud, and they're all just tools, right? And so a lot of people will take it upon themselves and with that attitude that, well, this isn't that difficult. I'll just cut out that thing that makes me feel like shit. And there's lots of information online to look at that. So low FODMAP diets are one of them. Carnivore diets another one. But all of them have the same flavor. They eliminate foods. That's why they're elimination diets. The problem is elimination diets are not a permanent fix. Elimination diets end up decreasing the variability in your intra and intermeal contents. So within a meal and then across your meals. And one thing that we know, and it's really, I don't know why this is so hard to understand for a lot of people, but is that the more diverse your plate is and your meals are across days, the more diverse the bacteria and the enzymatic control has to be in order for you to process that food. The problem is that when people have screwed their guts up with, proton pump inhibitors and they've been on antibiotics and they didn't take any sort of countermeasures to get around, these drug interventions that are much necessary at the time, but actually, repair from them. So, for example, if you're taking a proton pump inhibitor, that gets rid of hydrogen ions in your guts, so your pH of your stomach acid goes up, right? So acidity goes down. And one of the things that one of the enzymes that break down proteins, pepsinogen, requires high levels of hydrochloric acid or hydrogen ions to activate it into pepsin and break down the proteins so that when they make it to the duodenum, they can be absorbed as polypeptides, dipeptides, amino acids. And so what ends up happening, a lot of people is they'll go on a bout of proton pump inhibitors and some antibiotics for whatever reason. They had heartburn or whatever. So they go on them. And then everything they eat causes heartburn. So they decide, they've been watching the Liver King get jacked on eating, a bunch of raw fucking meat. So they decide I'm going to go on the carnivore diet. Great, good thing. And then all of a sudden they say, well, then all of a sudden they're online, right? And they're like, carnivore diets, everything. Look, I couldn't eat a fucking meal without shitting my pants or being constipated or, you name the problem with your guts. So therefore, these foods that make me feel like shit are poison. Veggies are poison, berries are poison, fruits are poison. You'll get diabetes from it. Trust me, my blood sugar goes up every time I eat a fucking apple. Goes to the roof. I've got a continuous glucose monitor on. It's tagged to my fucking Apple Watch, and I got all these gadgets that tell me, how horrible these foods are. Well, yeah, they're horrible for that person because they haven't unfucked the situation that they screwed up way back when they were on the proton pump inhibitors and the antibiotics. And so, of course, something that doesn't contain fermentable products, like vegetables, like high FODMAP vegetables, is going to make you feel better. The key is how do you get those important things back into the diet so you can reestablish all that microbiota, the bacteria in your large intestine. How do we get that back in there so that when we eat these foods, they produce short chain fatty acids that then decrease all the inflammation. They tighten the junctions on our epithelium in our gut, stop lipopolysaccharides from leaking into the blood, and get things back on track. And that's where the magic really, really happens. So the general population does understand that when we do an elimination diet, take some probiotics, we're going to feel better. But the problem is they end up getting stuck in that loop. And they, it limits their life. Like they go to a party and they decide to have some of the broccoli dip or the broccoli slaw. And the next thing you know, they got to leave early because they've got diarrhea. And that's strictly because they just don't have the microbes to take care of the foods that they're eating because they've eliminated all the foods that challenge their guts to create the products that take care of those foods when they eat them.
I mean, like everything, I think the devil's in the dose. But in variability, certainly there has to be, like if I just moved back to Toronto, and there's every type of food under the sun in Toronto. You get Ethiopian, you can get food from countries I didn't know existed. And it's like, certainly I would be asking for it if I went out and just, I was like, you know what, I'm going to have a hormetic gut week where I'm just going to like lick fucking lampposts and eat paella one day and Ethiopian food the next day and Sri Lankan food the next day. Like there has to, in promoting variability for those who can tolerate it, right? Like I've seen so many, my sister was one of these, she just went gluten-free. Now she's a sensitive nightmare. Like did anyone in the back look at gluten and then look at my dinner? Because if they did, like I'm going to be going through it. How do you recommend variability for gut health when it comes to food choices and in broadening and expanding in a way that itself doesn't cause like acute gastric distress and gut health problems?
Yeah, so you can't just do an elimination diet for 6 weeks and then all of a sudden say, okay, you feel good? Now let's go back to eating a fucking shawarma, right? Yeah, so it's actually a stepwise process of reestablishing, figure out which foods you're actually sensitive to and which ones you aren't. Now,
is there a way to do that without food? Because like one thing I wanted to talk to you about is like the testing that's out there, whether it's you're spitting into a cup and sending it off to some lab genetic testing. Your ancestors are 83% Swedish, and you also can't eat sourdough bread, or like some bullshit like that. Where's the validity in assessing for what gets eliminated, or are there big rocks like, hey, let's try this?
Yeah, so there are ways to assess it. Fecal samples are probably the best way to see if you've got, a commensurable bacterial situation or not. But there's a number of other tests out there that look for, issues. So the first one I would actually do for all my clients that have any sort of GERD, like gastrointestinal reflux, like heartburn, any of that stuff, is the first thing I do is say get tested for H. pylori, right? Because we know that H. pylori is the cause of ulcers now, gastric ulcers. We know that if you have, a high level of H. pylori bacteria in your digestive system, that you're gonna have problems with your guts. And we also know, in general, that the pharmacological treatment for that is to take antibiotics. And once we wipe out H. pylori, though, then we can reestablish the guts by just testing foods. And so, yes, there are things that we can test for. We can test, like I said, fecal samples to see if you have a diverse and dense microbiota, because it's all coming from the large intestine, and that's where your poop's coming out of. It's your colon. There are tests out there, like you said. There's breath tests, and there's all these different tests. And I have some companies that I support on these things. However, generally speaking, we don't know enough about how much of this bacteria is good and how much of this bacteria is bad, and what makes it so that it's commensurable. Because just like your lawn, right? You're gonna have weeds regardless, unless you have a full plastic lawn. We don't know what the actual ratios are and anything else. We just know that there's a lot of correlation between people with obesity and what their microbes look like, and people that are very fit and athletic and what their microbes look like, and then we can correlate that with their digestive distress or not, or their performance and not, or their inflammatory responses or not. But other than that, really, there's not like a full acid test, like a litmus test where you go, dunk, yep, that's this, and therefore we add in this, and that you're going to be all better. That's not the case at all, and that's strictly because of the phenotypes. Everybody's phenotype is different, because your gut health is established between gestation and up to like 3 or 4 years old. And if you were, born of vaginal birth, that's an advantage. If you're born a C-section, you've got a skin microbiota coming into you first instead of a vaginal microbiota. If you're breastfed, the breast has its own microbiota. So if you're sucking on a bottle that's sterile, which we sterilize them, we boil them in water, versus sucking on, a nipple that's maybe at the fucking Ohio Mall, right?
Mutant.
There's some bacteria on that thing.
Jesus.
That child,
That's our Uber driver.
Oh, someone's sucking on that nipples right now. Oh, that's a whole other story.
You've got a completely different bacterial load, and you got to remember that, when a child is born, or before it's born, is relatively naive for bacteria. Now, one thing we do know that now that we didn't know, say 10 years ago, is that even during gestation, you're getting microbes from the mother, and they're crossing through a number of different ways into the baby's digestive system. And so it really honestly depends on how you pick your parents, your birth route, your breastfeeding, how long you breastfed for. So
it's got to be a point of diminishing returns there.
Well, you want it's funny? So my wife,
Great segue. Stoked.
This is a good one too, and hopefully my in-laws aren't listening to this, because they'll probably be really mad at my wife. But we breastfed my daughter till she was like about 4, it seemed, and I mean it. Like,
Is that long? That's a long time.
That's
That's
like
like
a
fucking
long
long.
time.
Usually it's about 6 months. If you do
wow.
if you do a year, you're a superhero mom.
Yeah.
But and it's interesting because my wife, studies like her PhD was done on breastfeeding, and the benefits of breastfeeding are massive. And as long as the host, the mother, is super duper healthy, then the child is going to get a lot of really good microbes and everything from that breast milk. So there is a massive importance in those kind of early years and how you develop. But then, so for example, in my household, like I got 2 older stepdaughters, both of them were breastfed the same length of time. One of them had an infection when she was about 2 or 3 years old and was put on a massive bout of antibiotics. She's always had gut health problems. She's always had gas. She's always had issues with gut health. And our other daughter, nothing. And so there's an example right within a family, raised by the same mother, with the same amount of breastfeeding and everything else, same vag, big differences. So the phenotype, when people come to me, I don't know what their phenotype is. So I really asked them, the first questions I asked them was, were you born, were you born of vaginal birth? And they'll be like, oh, and if they weren't, and then I find out they weren't breastfed, they were formula fed. And I found out that they went through this massive inoculation with, antibiotics when they were younger. We've got a different monster to work with. And a lot of those times, we might even be dealing with something that's not really a gut health issue so much, but rather a disease, like celiac disease, right? And so where the danger is in this whole kind of just let's apply this, term gut health to everything, is if you don't do that back work and understand the client, you don't know to get them to go get tested for celiac or go get tested for Crohn's. And you can do a lot of damage to people. Like Crohn's is a deadly disease, right? So it's really important to understand that background, the phenotype that you're working with at that present time, so that then you can make some tests for disease stuff. Then the other side of the coin is, are these food allergies or are they food sensitivities? Food allergies are pretty rare. People pretty much know if they have a food allergy, right? They were tested young and they're, the peanuts, will make them have anaphylaxis, so they stay away from them. But food sensitivities, people will say, like, I have a gluten allergy. Well, if you have celiac disease, then that makes sense. If you have Crohn's disease, probably a problem. But if you just, you notice when you eat wheat, you eat 1,000 calories of the spaghetti, then you get bloated and full, and when you wake up in the morning, you weigh more. Well, that's not really a gluten allergy. That's just what a lot of carbs do to you when you eat it, and people love eating spaghetti, right?
Do you see a point where the ability to process or even collect the multifactorial data to start making informed decisions starts to come down? Because you're you, and you're one of one. You're minted, and you have a certain ability to take on clients. But the market for handling complex gut health cases is seemingly endless. Is there, in your mind, is there a way to make this logarithmic, like a way to to AI or computer
Game the system a little.
Yeah, just take your brain and put it into something, or is it, obviously we can teach a computer this, but doing it efficiently seems to need a human touch.
It does, but there is a little bit of an algorithm, right? So let's say we have, Joe Bodybuilder comes to me. These are the best cases. Joe Bodybuilder comes to me. Has a really, really high HSCRP. He's on anabolic steroids. He's used a lot of caffeinated pre-workouts. There's just basically your average Joe in the gym. Comes to you and says, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm constantly shitting. I'm seeing solid food in my shit. These cases, there's a full algorithm for. Because we know that, first of all, high androgen use drives sympathetic nerve activity. Then right off the bat, we know this person's going to be in some state of catabolism all the time. And they're going to also be in a state of stress all the time. So if we could get that part figured out at the onset, then that's great. And so, you could say, well, the anabolics are a little bit hard on the digestive system. You're force feeding yourself chicken and rice. And because chicken and rice is the only thing you could digest before, and now you can't, you're to the point where your digestive system just doesn't have the enzymatic control or the bacterial load to be able to even handle the most simple digestible foods. And so really it's just a matter of incrementally imposing some interventions. So for everybody, for people like that, they're already on an elimination diet. So I would start them with a really, really high quality therapeutic probiotic at really high doses, like 450 billion colony forming units a day, and put them on like an inulin or some sort of soluble fermentable fiber that we can colonize their guts over a course of a month. First month, they will be completely bloated, constipated, and pissed off because you've kind of made things worse. But the more dysbiosis, so the worse their gut health is, the more those probiotics are going to really, really cause bloating and whatnot. But then if you know your shit, literally, you'll say to them, I promise you, within 6 weeks, this is all going to be no problem. And then we start adding foods in. And then all you do from there is, you make sure that the diet is a low FODMAP diet, so low in fermentable carbohydrates, basically. And low FODMAP lists are all over the internet now because it's become kind of a way to eat. And so you just you go through it, create their diet for them, make sure that they're getting enough fiber to be able to colonize those bacteria, because the whole point of taking a probiotic is to feed it soluble fermentable fibers, so that they instead of them just going through the system and pooping them out, you're creating a colony. And that's where the magic is. Because if you think of, and I don't know if you guys care about lawn care, but there's a point where I did. And if you think about lawn care, where the grass seed is the probiotic, right? And the fertilizer is your soluble fibers or fermentable fibers, then the key to a really nice lawn isn't like, I lived in one of these like fancy neighborhoods where everybody had competitions for the lawn. I did I hired these botanists from Guelph. Okay, everybody else has fucking lawn men coming in. So it's like a 16-year-old pretending he's spraying the lawn. He gets the hell out of there and puts a thing on and puts your bill in the thing. So I hired these guys, and they came to me and they said, "Listen, we're not gonna like the guy across the street keeps sodding his lawn to try and make it look good. Like that's not what you do. They're like, don't cut your lawn short. Keep it like 3.5, 4 inches long, and so the lawns are seed is our probiotic, right? And then we're going to overseed your lawn so that we can keep on growing more and more lawn within that lawn, and eventually that'll choke out the weeds. Now we do have some weed killers that we can specifically hit dandelions, hit these different things. But we're going to let the clover grow. We're going to let some of the crabgrass grow because it's really resilient in the areas where it grows, and you won't see it once your grass kind of overtakes it. And what you end up having here is within that lawn, you have the healthy bacteria, which would be or probiotic, the healthy part, which is the lawn, right? That's the healthy bacteria. You have your probiotics that you're throwing on top of there, the lawn grass seed, right? They're going to overseed it. And then they fertilize it so that only those grass seeds grow, so they colonize. And the idea behind it is when they spray a couple weeds, those weeds die off, and this lawn has this kind of commensurate environment with the crabgrass and the clover and those things. And it just grows thicker and thicker over time. But it takes like 3 years, right? So I did this at our old house, and we had this fucking lawn that was like a 13-year-old's hair. Like it was like hairline like this. It was like dense, thick, and I just kept on only cutting it, 3 inches, so it stayed at 3 inches, and this thing was nice. Same with your guts. You gotta.
I've learned so much.
The man loves an analogy. I was all in. You had me at fertilizer.
So it's the same thing with your guts, right? So you have this. If someone comes into you completely screwed, they've got a lawn full of weeds, right? So if there's enough grass there, then we can toss some grass seed on there, some probiotic, and we fertilize it with a little bit of soluble fiber. Then as it starts to colonize, they start feeling a little bit better, so then we can start adding more bacteria in. So then we start adding foods like kimchi and sauerkraut to every meal. And at first they're like, oh, this stuff's gross. But then when they start to realize that when they're eating that with their protein meals, it just goes down a lot better, and they can eat, another meal within 2 hours and not feel anything. And as you keep increasing incrementally increasing that growth of that bacteria, that's when you start to see symptoms dissipate. And a lot of, I'm generalizing here, but there are a lot of coaches out there that aren't, either they're not confident enough in the tools they're using, the algorithm, like we were talking, or they aren't patient enough to go through the incremental process of getting this person back on track. And the idea behind it is to, remember we talked at the beginning about kind of the placebo effect, is to garner that trust in the beginning, like, trust the process, like we say with training, right? Trust the process in this, it's going to get better. And if you incrementally increase their health, their gut health through kind of using that procedure, then the client will completely buy in. And once they bought in, now you can start getting them to eat all the stuff that only vegans eat, right? Now they're eating, instead of rice, they're eating quinoa. Well, why the fuck would I give them quinoa over rice? Well, because now we can get our carbohydrates just like we were before, but it comes with some fiber. And that's awesome because, one, we stabilize blood glucose, so they just feel better over time. And two, we push ourselves closer and closer to that kind of critical 40 grams of fiber that I like to see everybody at. Most people come to me with like 10, 12 grams of fiber on board. So it's really just the algorithm is really just establishing your lawn. And then once you've established your lawn, keep on feeding it now with foods that keep that lawn going, and you can just fire the guys from Guelph and say like, see you later, fuckers, thanks for all the help. Well, the rest of your neighborhood's putting the probiotics on every fucking 2 months, and then they've got the fertilizer coming in, they got the guys spraying the weeds, and they're constantly putting out fires instead of actually taking the time to reestablish something that should have been established, when they were born. And that's, kind of the nuts and bolts of like what you'd feed to a machine learning algorithm so that it could come out, it could spit out, here's what you do.
And it can do your lawn care.
And once you understand that, you're also gonna have a nice lawn.
I'm just going to
You won't
assume
be as
anyone
stressed.
with a oh, here we go. Here we go. Pull up the thread. Just make it
It's all
connecting
full
dots.
circle.
Yes,
Full
the 5-hour
circle.
test. Well, fuck, man. I mean, if it's one thing that we always get a kick out of, it's your ability to make complex things very understand. And I don't own a lawn. I've never owned a lawn. I think my parents had one.
Yeah.
My parents used to make me cut the grass with an electric lawnmower. And
Oh,
I think
you're
my
that
dad.
poor kid.
Yeah.
And that was back when you had to plug them in too.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's still. It was a Black and Decker one. I'm pretty sure my dad. I was like,
He's trying to
what's
kill
the likely right? I was like, what's the likelihood that this thing, if like a blade hits that, I was like, oh, you're done. You're getting mainline right from the house. I was like, oh, okay. He's like, look, I'll tell you what. I'll wrap rubber tape on the handle. I was like, I don't think that's going to work. And he knew it wasn't going to work because he's an electrical engineer. But no, your ability to take complex things and break it down. I try and, it's funny, I'm kind of getting known for speaking in analogies. So the second you said lawn care, I was like, this has nothing to do with gut health, but I know in 5 minutes it's going to. I appreciate your ability to, because I don't care about nutrition. I don't know if I don't care. Chipotle is a meal prep service company for me. Like, that's where I'm at. So when I can take things actionable away and go, oh, okay, I get it now. It's not going to change the way I behave, mind you, but I get it. Because if shit goes wrong, I'm still calling your ass and be like, yo, dog, I kept been on the toilet for like 5 weeks.
Well, here's the other thing too, right? Is like people. In my talk I'm going to give tonight, it's going to be all about like muscle protein synthesis, anabolism, protein intake. And what's really interesting is that when people eat high protein diets, the microbiota, like the bacteria, respond almost instantaneously, like very quickly to high protein. And what it does is it selects for the bad bacteria for the most part. And so what ends up happening is there's this big debate on like how much protein can we digest, right?
Yeah.
Fucking, is it 30 grams per meal?
Yeah.
Is it 25 grams per meal? And it's pretty funny because it really depends on your gut bacteria phenotype. Because if you, and this is one of the best acid tests I think out there for like high protein eaters, which we all are. I love fucking protein. It's obviously very important for hypertrophy and all kinds of other things. Is that if you're having farts that smell like sulfur, that's hydrogen sulfide gas and a number of other gases that get mixed in there. But the point is that's fermenting amino acids. And the reason why the amino acids are making it to your colon is because they're not digesting properly and then getting diverted through, the duodenum as, dientripeptides into the blood. And so it just kind of makes its way to your colon. Pretty simple system, right? And then then all of a sudden the fermentation byproducts of protein degradation or protein fermentation are actually products that are harmful to your body. And so one of the biggest take homes for the big protein eaters is eat some bacteria with your food. Eat probiotics with your food. Don't take probiotic pills with your food. Just throw some bacteria containing foods with it. So have a bowl of fucking yogurt with it. Have some kimchi and sauerkraut, maybe like a quarter cup or half a cup with your protein meal. Maybe instead of having white rice with every meal, throw in a cup of quinoa. Mix it in with your white rice. That way you have some bacteria. Your bacteria has some fertilizer to grow that lawn that you need, so that you're not farting out methane gas all the time. And that if the farts don't bother you, the fact that you're shitting out all that protein that you're eating that's not going into anabolism should, because that's the whole idea, right? So at the end of the day, there's your acid test as to whether or not you're digesting all your protein or not. And so then when we ask the question, right? Well, how much protein can we digest in a single meal? It's like, it depends on how well your guts are set up for digesting protein.
You make it sound so simple.
I love it.
Gut health course.
Yeah.
Launching what? November.
November. Yeah.
Yeah.
Late November.
November
Yeah.
something. End November.
End of November.
No,
Yep.
yeah. Well, so
We all nailed it.
Yeah,
Go team.
we work here. No, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you have a busy schedule. You just flew in and you're flying out. We're kind of ships passing in the night. So any chance we have the cameras and Jay Marsh and you in a room, we got to make sure we make this a habit. So I do appreciate everything you're doing for us, and just really the reputation of you and I has gone nothing but skyrocket. Like, hey, we know this guy. It's on my LinkedIn. It's like, I know Dwayne Jackson. But good luck with your talk this evening. Good luck with the rest of the things you got coming down the pipe this year, and we'll hopefully see you on the podcast again soon.
Thanks for your time, Dwayne.
Love you guys. Thank you.
Love you too.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate it, man.
Thanks.